Welcome to the Jewish Education Experience podcast with your hosts, Yasmina and Ari.
To our audience, thank you so much. We really appreciate your support, and we appreciate you sharing our podcast with others also. Please consider supporting our podcast financially by contributing via Zelle, jewisheducationpodcast@gmail.com, or by joining our Patreon community, www.patreon.com/Jewish Education Experience Podcast. And to all of you Jewish educators and students of Jewish education around the world, chizchu ve'imtzu. May you be strengthened and encouraged in your holy endeavors. Please remember to hit that subscribe button so that you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast may not necessarily be those of the hosts.
Guest today is Rabbi Jeff Wohlgelernter. Hello, Rabbi Jeff. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you for being with us here today.
It's a real pleasure to be here, and I appreciate you inviting me. You asked me the question of a little bit about who I am and sort of what my credentials are as an educator. So I'll tell you that I have to really go back sort of to the beginning, which is when I was in yeshiva. I got very involved in pirchei and in kids groups and all kinds of stuff like that. I was, in fact, on the track towards medical school eventually. Was my dream to be an ophthalmologist. Wow. And somewhere in the middle there, I decided that I think it was right after organic chemistry, I realized that this is not necessarily the place I want to be going. And I went home. I remember telling my father that I was switching my major and was going to stay in yeshiva in Ner Yisrael, but I was going to be going for a psychology major. And with the eye towards going into education, my father was an educator for 50 years and wasn't impressed. But be that as it may, that was the path that I took. I got very involved with NCSY and with camps and with all kinds of activities, and eventually started teaching, and went to Australia for a summer, really like a summer of teaching, and ended up staying there for a few years. And from there, I came to America and taught in the day school in San Diego, and I taught in the high schools in San Diego, and I've really been teaching in Australia. I taught in high school, and I've been teaching since then children, teenagers, adults. I have a very extensive adult education program that we built in shul in La Jolla, and continue that even now. I actually continue teaching high school. I just got done about 15 minutes ago with my daily high school class.
Is in America?
In America, yeah.
Wow.
I teach over Zoom, which that's its own story.
Have you been doing that since before COVID?
I was doing that before COVID.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I was teaching. I was teaching already before COVID on Zoom, because I had come to Eretz Yisrael on a sabbatical, and so I continued doing what I was doing. I wasn't doing high school, but I was doing adult teaching, and was doing that all over Zoom. Continuing my classes, my Daf Yomi, and all the other classes that I give during the week, and I was continuing those. And then when Corona hit, we were already up and running on Zoom, so we didn't even miss a beat. Whereas the rest of the world was still trying to figure out what the Zoom thing is. We were running the whole program on Zoom.
So you've been all over. You've seen it all, huh?
Through the Zoom camera, yeah.
Your nickname on your podcast is the Father. So
the Father, that's correct. That's correct. This my son's my son's description of me, which is appropriate for him for sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess I was going to ask you at the end to put in a plug for your own podcast, but maybe can you just tell us real quick what you guys are doing?
So we have this thing called Around the Shabbos Table, and we've been, Baruch Hashem, we're living right across the street from each other, and we spend every Shabbos together. And Shabbos and even when I was in La Jolla raising my children, when you listen to them talk about the Shabbos Table, it's really very interesting. We never really had a segment in the Shabbos Table of telling over a Devar Torah. the whole thing was talking about Torah, was talking about life, was talking about things in the world through a Torah perspective. They're very meaningful conversations, and that's why my kids grew up in their Shabbos table, and we have that now. Between us, we discuss things. The whole family gets involved. Everybody talks about issues and things through a Torah lens. So we decided to bring it to a podcast, and we call it Around the Shabbos Table. And it's basically like a Shabbos conversation. We take a topic, and we go into the topic. Every once in a while, we bring on a guest. The mother was a guest. The uncle was a guest.
Yes.
And we talk about an issue through a Torah lens. It's not a shir. It's not a Devar Torah, but it's throwing in what we know and understand to make sense of the things that are going on around us.
Yes, and it's a very effective method, if I can say myself. Personally, I've experienced that. So, are there any educators that you particularly admire?
So there are some of them my own Rebbeim and others, people in the field of education that I've seen, not so much in the classroom or in their actual educational capacity, but I've seen their products and I've seen what they've done. My Rebbe, Rabbi Sacha Friend, was to me a master educator. It wasn't that he is just a good speaker, but that he understands the leiv and nefesh of his Talmud, and he is able to educate them, not to impart information, which is what an educator is. And a lot of times in education, we end up having people that are Talmidei Chachamim, that are good imparters of information, but not necessarily mechanchim, not necessarily with an ability to really understand who it is they're talking and to touch the soul of the person that they're talking to.
For sure.
And I felt from him always like incredibly moved when he would talk to us, when he would talk to me personally, because I felt that he was talking straight to me and understood me very well.
Yeah, you know what that reminds me of? Something we heard from Rabbi Wolbe. Rabbi Yaakov Wolbe was actually here in Harrisburg. He was talking about his grandfather, Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe. And I think it may have been the Mashgiach of Yerucham Lubavitz, who supposedly had this gift to be able to, know exactly how many students he was able to, teach and to be able to have that connection with each one of them.
How would you recommend educators? How can we do a better job at that, reaching our students and really connecting with them? And
yeah, they don't teach that in college, do they?
No, and I don't want to criticize. It's not. I don't like doing that, and there's no necessity to do that. It's not a terrible system that we have, but there are things that could improve, and I think that one of the things is the shaping that we give to our mechanchim. There are mechanchim that have it naturally. They have this love of their talmidim naturally. They have this desire to help and to raise talmidim, midu talmidim harbe, to really put them on their feet and to raise them up. And for those that don't have it naturally, so I feel that we could do a more comprehensive job of vetting them, and for those that have raw capabilities but they're not trained, to give them training so that they have the ability. Because a good mechanech, of course, we want our mechanechim to be knowledgeable in what they're teaching. I mean, that's a given. But a good mechanech has to love, and a good mora, as a good teacher, whether it's a man or a woman, has to love their students and desire to get in to the soul of their students.
that makes sense.
Right. So you mentioned mechanech, obviously from chinuch, which is education, which can be a bit of an amorphous term. How would you define education?
Is a trickle down effect. It's not an injection. It's not just giving, I've got this and I'm giving it over to you, but that it is pouring out of me and it is reaching you. And if that's not the way you are, if you're not so saturated and so in love with what you're doing, and it's just bubbling out of you, so then it is going to have a minimal effect on your students. And when we're talking long-term effect, it's going to have a minimal effect. Look, this is really, I'm not sure who our audience is, but this is really, at the end of the day, this is the difference between Noach and Avram. That Noach was 100% got the whole message, knew exactly what God wanted of him, and he carried that out. He told the people what the message that God wanted him to tell them, that the flood was coming, destruction was on its way, you need to improve your ways. And he had no effect on anybody.
Right.
Because it was something he was just imparting a message.
Yeah.
And Avram Avinu said nothing. Avram Avinu had people over for lunch.
Right.
He asked them to give a little blessing to God. That was it. But there was nothing intense about it. But by Avram Avinu, it was just pouring out of him. And when it's pouring out of you, that's mashpia. I think of my 10th and 11th grade Rebbeim, who were no longer alive. They were both. I went to a day school in New York, Hebrew Academy, Nassau County, Hank, and I graduated from there. We had incredible Rebbeim, two world-class Talmidei Chachamim. One of them was named Rabbi Warman, who wrote a set of Sfarim, 15 some odd Sfarim called Sheiris Yosef, which are lamdisha, very detailed kind of Talmudic discourse Sfarim. He was an incredible Talmud Chacham. And the other was a fellow by the name of Rabbi Yaakov Weil. And he was a Lakewooder. He lived in Borough Park. We were Long Island kids. Most of my class wasn't religious. He was, what they term today, he was a yeshiva shemensch, but an incredible Talmud Chacham. He wrote a sefer on Krisos. He was learning Daf Yomi. We didn't know what the word Daf was. We certainly had a hard time with the word Yomi too, but we had no idea what this was. And he was just on fire. He taught us Haggadah, and then he wrote a Haggadah. And when I read that Haggadah, I'm saying, wait, I know every one of these things that he wrote in here because that's what he taught us. And that's become my Seder, is based on all of that which he taught. They were a classic, the two of them, very different people, but classic example of somebody who Torah was pouring out of them.
Right.
He used to say to us, he used to say to us that, now you're going to say, what's this Meshuggah whale telling you? Says, but in 10 years' time, you're going to say, oh, that's what he meant. And I, like everybody else in my class, had that penny drop moment of, oh my God, that's what the guy meant.
Wow.
But that's a very interesting question from an education perspective, because a lot of what they teach is basically trying to make content developmentally appropriate. So for the younger the child, the more you have to take the content and kind of refine it down so that they can receive it. But it sounds like what he did was he was actually teaching stuff that was above your level, and he was saying you're going to get this in the future, right?
That was more of his Musar messages, was surrounding that idea of you'll get this eventually. Not the Torah. The Torah was very much tailored to us.
Okay.
I mean, he pushed us very hard, but it was something that we were capable of grasping. He didn't worry so much about the Hebrew, though he wanted us to be able to read things inside, but much more concerned about the content. And again, I don't even know how much he understood of that. In other words, I don't know how professional of an educator he was. He was just somebody who was, like I say, just completely in love with Torah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to be mashpia. He was able to get that across.
Wow. Would you say that, because they both inspired you, and there definitely, we find so many people, whether they go to day school or not, and they end up kind of maybe moving away. Do you find that educators who are like some of the ones that you had, if they can find that one spark, they're able to hold on to people so that they can maintain their Judaism, maintain their Yiddishkeit? and not walk away? Does that make a difference, you think?
It makes somewhat of a difference, but you have to remember that you have a kid in 10th grade, 11th grade. Even if you're not a great Rebbe, so a lot of times they'll say, that Rebbe turned me off.
Mhm.
It's not always true. And even to be able to hold on to a student, what you do in 10th grade, it's important, but the decisions that they make afterwards are also going to be part of that whole either drift or that shift towards. So it's you play an important role in it in high school, but you're just playing a role. You have an ability to spark them, but you can't guarantee anything. You can have a great year with a student and say the kid's on fire, and then in 11th grade or 12th grade, so then he falls apart. Or after high school, he makes certain decisions, and that's it. The best Torah that he's learned was in 10th and 11th grade.
Right.
So you can't. There's no guarantees.
How much does the family influence that? I know, sorry.
No, it's an important question. It's people need to realize that they the education really happens at home, and it's not really the Rebbeim or the Moras that are really they're teaching. They're playing an important role, but what they should be playing is a role along with the parents, not that they're playing a role either without parents or against parents.
Right.
And when I say against parents are sending them to whatever particular school you're teaching in. They're sending them to that school, so they're committed to that kind of education. But that's only because that's the choice of where they send them. But in their lifestyle and in their value system and in the message, the real message that's getting across to the child. So that's not always the same message that the Rebbe is trying to impart.
Right.
Right. I think it's also a difficult question because clearly you see that there are, even some of the greatest people, their children go in a different direction. And you have parents who don't know anything and their children become the greatest people. So
I've had to unfortunately spend time with parents whose children have gone in the opposite direction of where the parents are trying to bring them.
Mhm.
I'm not trying to take any responsibility off of anyone, but if you did your job in trying to educate your child is a person, and you really want them to become a person. And as a person, unfortunately, they sometimes make mistakes. They make wrong decisions. And though you need to take responsibility where you need to take responsibility, but you also need to be able to look at them and say, they made an unfortunate choice.
Right.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned you teach high school students. I don't know if you teach any other ages, but how do you talk about God, Hashem, and how might this differ with the various age groups that you teach?
So with teenagers, I teach God. I basically teach Gemara and Chumash. God is a given in those two subjects. In other words, I'm not teaching Hashkafa. It's a given. We're learning God's Torah. So every once in a while, you get into a discussion. When you do, I'm learning now Shmais. So God talking to Moshe, it's coming up. But you listen. You have to listen to what they're asking, what they're really asking. Are they doubting, or are they just unsure? Are they just confused? They don't have the right information, and you have to respond to that. I don't believe that the way that the words, the energy, some of the outer trappings have to be different for a teenager than they do for an adult, but the ideas are exactly the same ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think as the teacher that you have to take a stand on the divinity of the Torah? I mean, I know to me, it just seems like, it's going to be night and day if you teach a child that the Torah is from Hashem or if you teach them that's not from Hashem.
If you're teaching them not from Hashem, you shouldn't be in one of our schools.
Well, you said you grew up in a school that was with non-religious people, right?
Non-religious people, but the schools are from school.
Okay.
The teachers were all B'nai Torah. They were all from people. The Moras were all 100% religious people. Which was really like the amazing thing that the staff was a stellar staff. The students weren't all up to that.
Right.
But look, that also, when you accept certain things as a dover pashut, in other words, this is what it is, and you're not forcing anything. You just, the context in which you're teaching is that these things are givens. So then, when a question arises, it's easier to deal with it rather than to say, these are difficult things, and I recognize that they're really difficult. There is a methodology like that, of validating the question, but I'm not sure how successful that is.
Right.
Well, there are some day schools that, I guess, in a way to make their school more inclusive, they kind of tone down their religiosity, or if that makes sense, they kind of tone down their level. And to me, it seems like if they would keep that level up to where it was, everyone would kind of rise to that level. And even if you do have non-religious kids, they're learning a certain amount that's going to carry them through, right? I mean,
yes. You're hitting some very raw, I'll say, and important issues that I don't want to burn any of my bridges, so,
Right.
so I'm gonna answer them very carefully. But no, it's a challenge in out of town day schools and out of town schools. It's a challenge to you want retention, you want to hold on to these kids, and you need to hold on to them, because for some of them after 8th grade, that's it, they're gone. And you need to hold on to them, so you don't want to cause too much conflict at home. But there has to be a balance between that. There has to be a balance of bringing them up, and a certain degree of not worrying about the kind of conflict it will cause. You'll teach the parents how to deal with their uncomfortable feelings because their kids are becoming a little more religious and a little more Jewish than they expected. You can teach parents how to deal with that, rather than never have that conflict, because you've watered it down so much that it's so comfortable for everybody that you won't have any kids that are in conflict on this.
Right.
That makes sense.
This was my issue teaching adults also. You can water things down, but then what do you got? You got water with a little bit of Torah in it, but it's nothing. Or you can present, this is what it is, and not be afraid of it. And people know exactly, they know what's in, they know what's out, they know what's right, they know what's wrong, and they'll choose and do what they're comfortable with when they're comfortable doing it.
Right.
In a lot of kiruv situations, there's sometimes pushing. It's like you push people to take on Shabbos or to take on more mitzvahs. I've always myself personally just had a hard time with that. You have to present strong. This is what it is, and then let people mold into that and get into that when they're ready and how they're ready.
Definitely.
Right. Well, yeah, that definitely is a challenge. Rabbi Jeff, you sound like an extraordinary educator. What's the biggest challenge that you have faced as an educator?
So what I've seen over the past years is apathy.
Right.
Not anger, just apathy from teenagers. Like, unless they're brought up in a very warm Torah home, it's like, who cares?
Right.
Why? So, but part of our challenge is to try to turn them on and then teach them something. Mm-hmm. And we actually, the principal that I work for and a few of the Rebbeim, we actually went around to educators and asked them, how do you deal with kids that are apathetic? This was a couple of years ago. And it was interesting. I wasn't moved by many of the answers that we received. I wasn't sure that they understood the level of apathy. We're not talking about apathy of kids in the 5 towns or in Flatbush. We're talking about apathy of kids that they don't live inside of a religious Jewish area, and many are not coming from homes.
Right.
But they're in Jewish homes, and they're going to a Jewish school and not feeling it. Like, it's just there's just nothing motivating them saying, I really want to learn a little bit. I really want to know something.
Do you think this apathy is like a newer phenomenon, or is this something that, I mean, I'm just thinking back to, like when the Hasidic movement started, was that something that they had to deal with back then? And then maybe you can use more Kabbalah, more Hasidus to kind of attract some of these young students?
So it's very interesting. I guess today you call it, the thank you Hashem, movement. And the truth is, some of that works, but much of what I see is that they're even that is advanced for them, meaning that they're not even on that level. Many of my students of you'll spark them with a song, you'll spark them with a Hasidic insight, with a twist on something. The basic is not the basic interest. The real desire is not there, and therefore the other stuff which helps package it and push it and get it moving.
Right.
It's useless. It's too advanced.
Uh-huh.
We're talking about just basic motivation. Is how do you make this something that is critical to their lives when they don't see it around, they don't see their parents learning,
Yeah.
they don't see their community engaged in learning.
Right.
They don't have good examples. They see the rabbis, but they get paid to do this, so of course they're going to learn.
Right. So, okay, well, the next question here is, how do you stay motivated as an educator? But I'd also like to ask you, how do you motivate the students then?
So I don't have a great answer. I can only tell you, it's sometimes difficult to describe what you do. You just do it.
Mhm.
And I just do it. I try with as much energy as I can muster and as much excitement and enthusiasm as I can muster, just to constantly be pushing. And right now we're learning a sugya in Gemara, and I decided to learn through with them, to learn it through in halacha, which is it's interesting. You take the Gemara, you learn the Rishonim, the questions, the answers, and then you put the whole package together in the halacha. And I'm getting a minor response, but definitely sparked a little bit. And I'm just trying with almost every day to try to come up with something new, something that's gonna spark this one, it won't spark that one, and just trying. My goal is to try to inspire them not just in general Judaism, but inspire them in learning and in Limud Torah and how important that is. And the only way that I can do that is by staying inspired myself.
Right.
That makes sense. What role does the internet play, do you think, in in education, and how do we find that balance?
The internet is, well, now I'll tell you, on Zoom, I think that is in my crowd, in the kids I'm teaching, I think it's almost impossible to teach on Zoom because they have perfected looking at the screen and making you think that they are 100% with you.
It's true.
As they watch a Netflix movie, or they lose another level of their favorite game. Sometimes I'll just pop a kid's name and I'll say, "Did you win or lose?" just catch them off guard. And sometimes they even answer me and say, "No, we just lost." Oh, Rabbi, I didn't mean that.
You can see the reflections in their eyeballs.
I could see the whole thing. You could tell exactly. You can
Right.
tell the way a kid's sitting. So it's
True.
to me a very, very big challenge. I was trying to deal with it head on for a while, and then I said, "Don't worry about it, just keep going," because it's just too big and it's too tempting for them. You have a screen open. I look at, I got the same problem. You got a screen open in front of you. Oh, let me just check my email. And even though I'm on Zoom, you can't tell if I'm checking my email or not.
Right. Yeah, the guy could
like I said, I could have been here in my pajamas.
Wow.
Yeah, the internet is, and I also find that when I was teaching, face to face, the students were exhausted.
Mhm.
So I would ask them, why are you so tired? I had a lot of homework. And I'm sure that they did have a lot of homework. Homework that could have been done in 3 or 4 hours.
Right.
except with all the breaks to watch. I got to watch this episode and I got to watch that episode, and then I have to binge on 3 of those and then play a couple of games and then chat. So they're going to sleep 2, 3 o'clock in the morning because they got this thing right in front of them.
Right.
So to me, those are the challenges. Can you use this to your advantage? Yeah, there's a lot of cool things you can do with computers, but at the end of the day, the internet is presented a challenge to teaching. I'm not even talking about the stuff that goes into their brains because of what their eyes are seeing. That for where I'm holding with them, that's a halbetzara. Like that's its own problem. But it's not even about the schmutz. It's just about the time.
Right.
And then they graduate, they get older, eventually they have a job and bills to pay, and they still have those same habits of having to watch this episode and that episode. There's no time for anything.
You're absolutely correct. I always marvel at people that have time to post on Facebook. What are you not doing that you have time to post on Facebook? I can't find time to press share. On my, I happen to have done it tonight, but I rarely can remember and have time to do. What are you not doing all day that you have time to constantly be sending things out? And I appreciated some of the things you sent me are funny, but come on, you got to have a life.
Right. It's true. What advice would you give to new educators who are just beginning their journey?
I had a nephew who just left Koil and went to teach here in Eretz Yisrael. A stellar human being, a beautiful neshama, a mensch, and somebody who I think is going to be a successful Rebbe. He had no training. He did subsequent to getting his job. He spent a lot of time with Rabbi and talking to them as far as methodology. And he came to talk to me and I said, I can only tell you one thing. To me, you'll get all the education. If you've got a basis, then you'll get the methodology. You'll figure it out. You'll speak to Rabbeim. You'll watch other Rabbeim. You'll see how the successful ones do it. But the most important thing you have to have coming from deep inside of you is a love for your Talmidim and caring for their success. It's not about you and your success in the classroom. It's about them and their success in the classroom.
Right. For sure. It's so true. I think sometimes as educators, we think, oh, we got to finish this content. We got to reach this. We got to reach that. And we forget that. Just kind of tying into that, how can we help our students build a proper Torah foundation?
Not in the classroom. In the classroom, we can reinforce the Torah foundation. But that Torah foundation has to come from the home, and it's got to be in partnership with the home.
Wow.
Well, what about like the Babylonian Talmudic academies? I mean, that's kind of what I think about, going back to schools, right? I mean, they were there, I'm assuming, all day learning, right?
Right, but by the time they got there, they'd already gotten their foundations. I have to imagine. I mean, I'm sort of projecting, but
right.
I'm assuming that they had their foundations.
Right.
When when they came into those academies and when they were sitting, they were already inspired. Nobody had to force them to go.
Yeah. See, I always wondered, why don't we have a Maseches Chinuch that teaches us how to be teachers?
We do. We have sprinkled all. First of all, we have psukim in the Torah, and then we have gemaras that explain them, and then we have halachas in the Rambam.
Right.
Very, very clear. A Rebbe has to be rested. A Rebbe has to be focused. He can't be Torah. I mean, is very specific in order to, because so much rests on the Rebbe. The methodology of how to do it is also very important. But where the Rebbe is holding, I think that's critical.
Right. So I got to ask you this, just because, we have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a newborn. So, and then, I think of the Mishnah where it says, Ben Chamesh LaTorah.
Right.
So I got to give my wife credit over here. She does a lot of the work in those, 0 to 5 years. So it's an interesting question she's asking, about the foundation, because I guess you could say the foundation starts from the beginning. So, isn't it the woman who's really laying a lot of that foundation at the beginning before they even get to 5, and you can start teaching them Torah?
That's correct. The love comes, and the love of what they're doing and the good feeling of what they're doing, that comes from, somebody once asked a Rebbe, I have a 3-month-old. When do I start worrying about the chinuch? So he said, you're 12 months too late. The chinuch starts right from the moment that they're born. Lefiani as daiti, like, when do you start teaching a kid to wash their hands? When they're infants. You don't say a word to them about doing it. You just wash their hands. And then as they get older, did you wash your dayan?
Right.
And then when they're 5 or 8 or 9, you're not fighting with that.
Right.
It's just a part of who they are. Saying Shema at night, it's just a part of who they are. Doing some kind of davening, it's just a part of who they are. The more we make things a part of who they are, the easier it is to fill in the blanks later.
It's
and
true.
to fill in the information later.
And our kids, I mean, they see us doing it. They, see us washing our hands and, lighting Shabbat candles and doing all these, saying brachot and everything. And
I mean,
they get excited about it.
That's why we brought Sahala to the podcast.
Yeah. Listen, there are Tanoim. The Gemara talks about Tanoim that were brought, that the mother brought them into the Beis Medrash and just kept in Beis Medrash, just sitting in the crib, so
Right.
that they should absorb this. This is really what chinuch is. The early stages of chinuch is really absorption.
Right. See, that's part of what's so scary to me about the COVID stuff, because it's already been a year. The kids haven't been to shul. Our 4-year-old, she probably remembers going a little bit, but 2-year-old, he doesn't know what shul is. He's never been, barely.
Right. So that stuff can be filled in, but think of what he's gotten in this year. Think of the mommy and daddy time that he's gotten, and that the love and energy that he has gotten. That's wouldn't necessarily want to take away shul, but if it's taken away and replaced with that, it's good. It's to their advantage. I was talking to my kids, and some of them were very happy about the fact that there was no school for a while, because they gave them an opportunity to really pour some real meaningful things into their children.
That makes sense.
Nice.
I just have a question, kind of going off of the shul and where the place. So ideally, in the future, not knowing what's going to be with all this COVID stuff and moving forward, I guess, what role do you think shul is going to play in our communities and as we move forward?
So it's hard to answer that, because I don't know. There's a side of me, maybe a cynical side, or a doom and gloom side, that's saying that this is here to stay, and that the structure of the synagogue is going to change, and it's going to become a place of davening, and not a place of socializing, nor a place of where, like a community center, which would be very sad to me. But nevertheless, there is a side of me that says that might be. But there's also the possibility that, look, in another couple of months, enough people will be vaccinated, and we will have learned a lot from this and gone back to the things that are good.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what shul is going to look like in the future. I hope that it gets back to the place that it should be. I mean, we have the shuls in America are families and community centers. Shuls in Eretz Yisrael are very, very different.
Yeah, it's different,
and they don't work.
Right. I mean, we call them shuls, which is basically schools, right?
Right.
But we don't do school there generally.
We do school.
No, you do.
No, I'm saying we do school. Like, a kid picks up so much from shul.
Uh-huh.
It's true.
So much from the atmosphere, from seeing other people, from the social environment, and especially if there's a little bit of education going on a Shabbos morning with kids programs. There's a kid. It's a valuable complement to what they're getting at home and what they're getting in school.
Right.
Yeah, I can hear that. This is a tough question. what do you think that successful Jewish education is going to look like in the future?
It's a spin-off of her previous question.
Yeah, I pray that we don't rely too heavily on the Zoom, and
Hope they don't get artificial intelligence in there.
yeah, it's because again, to me, the key to education is the emotion and the energy that comes from the teacher, and
Sure.
I just hope we get better at that. The better we get at that, at imparting that fire to our students, then the better product we'll have.
Right. How do you think we need to raise the compensation that teachers are getting so that more people will look at it as a way to, make a serious parnasa?
Right. One of the problems that everybody talks about is that, everybody says the most important person in their life is their educator, but we pay them like they're the least most important person in their lives. And if you want to get rid of the people that are just backing into a career because they sort of, they're Talmidei Chachamim, they know things, and logical is that they become teachers, but they don't necessarily have what it takes to be a teacher. If you want to get rid of that, then you have to give an encouragement to the people that really do have it, but look at it and say, I can't make a parnasa this way. I'm gonna go to school or do something else. Mm-hmm. So if you want to get those people, then you got to pay for them.
Yeah.
Hmm.
All right.
Well, but that's not rocket science. I mean, that everybody knows that. It's just a question of implementing that. That's all.
Right. That makes sense.
All right. Well, Rabbi Jeff, that was our list of questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, I think that what we talk about in a classroom is the same in a home, and that the more in love with Torah and Yiddishkeit you are, the better chance you have. There's no guarantees, but the better chance you have, your children will be in love with them also.
Right.
One of my son and I have talked about this a lot. Is we actually, on our first episode of Around the Shabbos Table, we actually spoke about it a little bit. And I think that it's something, what I've noticed, a lot of people need to be instructed of how to run a Shabbos table, especially if you have guests in the house, if they're the people, how to run a Shabbos table so that your kids are not running away from the Shabbos table, but can't wait to be part of the Shabbos table, even if it's not just you and your kids, even if there are guests there also. And I think that's these kinds of things are the critical places that we need to be placing energy into, of how to keep our kids excited and enthused about the things that we do.
Definitely.
Right. All right. Well, you've definitely influenced our Shabbos table, and we want to pass that on and tell people that they should definitely go and check you out and your son and what you guys are doing. You've made a big impact on me personally and on our family. So we just thank you so much, and we'll do what we can to blow this up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, far and wide all over the world, hopefully. And we're looking forward to continuing to listen to you guys and learn from you. And God willing, one day we'll be in Eretz Yisrael and we'll come track you down over there.
Amen.
Hashem. Wish you a lot of hatzlacha. This medium seems to be a very effective medium, and you should have a lot of hatzlacha in being marbitz Torah and spreading it around. What in whatever kinds of things you do with this, you should be successful in spreading it around and turning people on, lifting them up.
Amen. Thank you. Yeah, you as well. Am I allowed to say pass the cholent?
Absolutely.